Picture this. It's early 2010, and the Gulf of Mexico is buzzing with life like you wouldn't believe. We're talking crystal clear waters, fishermen hauling in catches that would make your jaw drop, and coastal towns thriving like there's no tomorrow. But here's the kicker. Nobody could have imagined what was about to go down just a few months later. Let me take you back to those golden days before everything changed. The Gulf was basically the breadbasket of America's seafood industry. Shrimp boats were coming back loaded to the brim, their nets practically bursting at the seams. You'd see these weathered captains with sun-beaten faces, grinning ear to ear as they unloaded pounds and pounds of the freshest Gulf shrimp you've ever seen. And oysters? Don't even get me started. Louisiana oysters were the real deal, the cream of the crop. Restaurants from New York to California were begging for more. What do you think it felt like to live in that moment, knowing the ocean was just giving and giving? The fishing communities along the coast had this rhythm, you know? Generations of families doing what their grandparents did, what their great-grandparents did. Wake up before sunrise, head out to sea, come back when the sun's setting with enough catch to keep the bills paid, and then some. It wasn't just a job, it was a way of life. Plain and simple. Down in places like Grand Isle, Louisiana, and Orange Beach, Alabama, folks were living the dream. Tourism was booming. Families from all over the country would pack up their minivans and head south for spring break or summer vacation. Kids building sandcastles, couples walking hand in hand along pristine beaches, retirees casting their lines off fishing piers. The Gulf was this massive playground that seemed endless. And the wildlife? Man, oh man, bottlenose dolphins were everywhere, popping up alongside boats like they were saying hello. Sea turtles would cruise through the warm waters, minding their own business. Pelicans dove headfirst into the waves, snatching up fish with precision that'd make a surgeon jealous. The underwater world was teeming with grouper, red snapper, amberjack, you name it. Coral reefs and artificial reefs were like underwater cities, packed with creatures of every shape and size. Doesn't that sound like paradise to you? The economy was humming along nicely. Oil rigs dotted the horizon, sure, but they'd been there for decades. People had gotten used to them. They were part of the landscape, part of the deal. The oil industry brought jobs, good-paying jobs that kept communities afloat. Platform workers would spend weeks out at sea, then come home with fat paychecks to spend at local businesses. Restaurants were packed every weekend. Shrimp po' boys, oyster platters, gumbo so thick you could stand a spoon in it. This was the good stuff. Charter fishing businesses were booked solid. Wedding venues along the coast were hosting ceremonies with the Gulf as the backdrop. Real estate agents were selling beachfront properties faster than hotcakes at a Sunday brunch. But here's the thing, and this is where it gets real. Everything was balanced on a knife's edge. The Gulf ecosystem was resilient, no doubt about it. It had weathered hurricanes, natural oil seeps, and human activity for centuries. The marsh grasses along the Louisiana coastline acted like nature's nursery, providing shelter for juvenile fish and filtering the water. The estuaries where fresh water met salt water created this perfect environment for all kinds of marine life to thrive. Scientists were studying the Gulf, sure, but most of the research focused on sustainable fishing practices and hurricane preparedness. Climate change was on people's radar, but it wasn't the main concern. The big worry was making sure the next generation of fishermen would have something to catch. Can you imagine living your whole life depending on something you thought would always be there? The culture around the Gulf was something special. Mardi Gras season brought parades and parties that spilled into the streets. Jazz music floated through the air in New Orleans. Cajun and Creole festivals celebrated food traditions that went back hundreds of years. People spoke with accents thick as molasses, dropping phrases like making groceries instead of going shopping, and calling everyone cher or baby. There was this sense of community that's hard to find these days. Neighbors actually knew each other. If your boat broke down, somebody would tow you in without asking for a dime. If a storm was coming, everyone pitched in to help secure loose items and prepare. It was real, authentic, no-nonsense living. The beaches themselves were absolutely stunning. Sugar-white sand in places like Pensacola, Florida. Barrier islands protecting the mainland. Marshes that stretched for miles, creating this intricate web of waterways perfect for kayaking and bird watching. At sunset, the sky would explode into oranges and pinks and purples that no camera could quite capture. Wildlife photographers would camp out for days, trying to get the perfect shot of roseate spoonbills or great blue herons. Nature lovers would take airboat tours through the wetlands, spotting alligators sunning themselves on muddy banks. The Gulf was a living, breathing entity that connected everything and everyone. Now the oil industry wasn't exactly hiding in the shadows. There were thousands of platforms operating in the Gulf, from shallow waters to deep-sea operations. The Deepwater Horizon rig itself had been drilling in the area since 2001. It was a massive piece of machinery, a technological marvel that could drill in water depths that would have been impossible just a generation earlier. Workers on these rigs were a tough breed. They dealt with grueling conditions, long hours, and the constant awareness that they were working in a dangerous environment. But the pay was solid, and many of them took pride in what they did. They were extracting the energy that powered America, and that meant something. Does it give you chills thinking about how quickly things can change? The regulatory environment was there, but let's be honest, it wasn't exactly tight as a drum. The Minerals Management Service was supposed to oversee offshore drilling, but there were concerns about the cozy relationship between regulators and the industry. Some folks raised red flags about safety protocols and emergency response plans, but those warnings often got buried under mountains of paperwork and bureaucracy. Most people living along the coast didn't spend their days worrying about oil spills. Sure, there had been incidents before. Spills happen, it's part of the deal when you're drilling in the ocean, but nothing catastrophic, nothing that couldn't be cleaned up relatively quickly. The prevailing attitude was that modern technology and safety measures made major disasters pretty much impossible. Life just kept rolling along. Fishermen headed out at dawn, tourists snapped photos, kids learned to swim in the same waters their parents and grandparents had. The Gulf was constant, reliable, eternal. But underneath all that normalcy, there were vulnerabilities that nobody was really talking about. The wetlands were eroding at an alarming rate, losing football fields of land every hour. Levees and canals built for navigation and flood control had disrupted natural water flow. The ecosystem was more fragile than it appeared on the surface. And then there was the Macondo well, being drilled by the Deepwater Horizon rig about 41 miles off the Louisiana coast. In early 2010, it was just another operation, another hole being punched into the ocean floor to tap into vast reserves of oil and natural gas. The crew was working round the clock, dealing with challenges that came with drilling at extreme depths. Nobody was panicking. Nobody saw it coming. What would you have done if you'd known what was just around the corner? The marine biology was incredibly diverse. Scientists had catalogued thousands of species living in and around the Gulf, from microscopic plankton to massive whale sharks. The food chain was complex and interconnected in ways we're still trying to fully understand. Tiny organisms fed slightly bigger ones, which fed bigger ones still, all the way up to apex predators like bull sharks and marlins. The economic value of the Gulf's ecosystem was mind-boggling. We're talking billions of dollars annually from commercial fishing, recreational fishing, and tourism. Entire supply chains depended on the Gulf's productivity. Shrimp processors, seafood distributors, bait shops, ice houses, boat repair businesses, all of it connected, all of it humming along. Cultural traditions were deeply rooted in the Gulf's bounty. Families gathered for crawfish boils in backyards, dumping pounds of the mudbugs onto newspaper-covered tables and digging in with their bare hands. Blessing of the fleet ceremonies brought communities together to pray for safe voyages and good catches. Fish fries at church fundraisers served up platters of fried catfish and hush puppies. The Gulf wasn't just an economic resource or an environmental treasure. It was home. It was identity. It was heritage. And in early 2010, everything seemed secure. The Obama administration had recently announced plans to expand offshore drilling, seeing it as a way to boost energy independence and create jobs. Environmental groups pushed back, but the momentum was there. The Gulf was going to play an even bigger role in America's energy future. Doesn't it make you wonder how we missed the signs? Technology was advancing rapidly. Drilling operations were reaching depths and distances that seemed like science fiction just decades earlier. The industry talked about fail-safes and backup systems, layers of protection designed to prevent disasters. Blowout preventers were supposed to be the ultimate safety net, capable of shutting down a well instantly if something went wrong. But here's what nobody wanted to admit. We were pushing the limits of what we knew how to do safely. Deepwater drilling is incredibly complex, with pressures and conditions that are hard to predict. Every well is different. Every geological formation presents its own challenges. The people working on these rigs knew the risks. They trained for emergencies, ran drills, followed protocols. But there's always that human element, that tendency to think, it won't happen to us, or we've got it under control. Life in the coastal communities continued its steady pace. Commercial fishermen were preparing for the busy season ahead. Charter boat captains were booking trips for the spring and summer months. Hotel owners were getting ready for the influx of tourists. Everything was gearing up for another profitable year. Kids in schools along the coast were learning about their local environment, studying the Gulf's ecosystems in science class, maybe taking field trips to aquariums or marine research centers. Future generations of fishermen and conservationists were being shaped by their connection to these waters. Have you ever taken something for granted until it was almost too late? The natural beauty of the Gulf was something people tried to capture, but never quite could. Sunrise over the water, with golden light spreading across gentle waves. Dolphins playing in the wake of a boat, their sleek bodies cutting through the surf. Pelicans flying in formation, looking like prehistoric creatures against a blue sky. There was magic in those moments, a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves. The Gulf had been there long before we arrived, and seemed like it would be there long after we were gone. But nature has a way of reminding us how powerful and unpredictable it can be. And human error, well, that's a whole other story. The stage was set, though nobody knew it yet. The Deepwater Horizon rig was drilling deeper, pushing harder, racing against deadlines and budgets. The Macondo well was proving difficult, with geological challenges that required constant problem-solving. Decisions were being made, shortcuts possibly taken, warnings potentially ignored. And all the while, life along the Gulf Coast carried on. The rhythm of tides, the cycle of seasons, the daily routines that defined existence in this unique corner of America. What do you think those final days of innocence felt like? This was life before the explosion, before the oil, before the environmental catastrophe that would change everything. This was the Gulf of Mexico at its finest. Productive, beautiful, resilient, alive. It was ordinary in the best possible way. It was home, and that's what makes what came next so heartbreaking.